Well, hello. Welcome to Orchid Bloom's podcast. Welcome back, bloomers. I am your host, Orchid Brown, with Orchid Bloom's podcast. You can find me on TikTok, X, Blue Skies, at Orchid Eye Brown. I hope you are enjoying this beautiful weather that we have thus far. I know I am. Out and about, enjoying myself, putting my feet up, having a beer. It is such nice weather, so I hope you guys are enjoying it before we go into a season of a little bit of cold and then snow. One of this month's episode will be on the topic of pederasty. This episode seems random, but it leads into an episode that I have been thinking about doing for 3 years now. I finally just decided that I should just do it during this summer schedule. 3 years is a long time to be holding on to a topic that is so very important to talk about. I've struggled with it, not because I don't care, but because I do. I take it very seriously. And I do want to approach the topic with care. I want to do it right. I'm not a man, which is why I felt uncomfortable taking on this topic, but I see the silence, the shame, and the pain that so many carry from situations such as this. This particular podcast episode actually came about after talking to a friend about the next podcast episode that's coming out following this one. I had told him that there needed to be an episode prior to the next episode because based on the premise that I had shared with him, it felt like I had too much going on in one podcast episode. So I kind of needed to separate them. So he threw out the word pederasty. He caught my attention with that one, definitely. I looked it up and now we are covering it. We begin by looking at something ancient, not to justify it, but to understand how deep this cultural sickness runs. And I also wanted to kind of compare it to what we are now seeing in our current society. Now, what is pederasty? What does it mean? It is a sexual activity involving a man and a boy or youth. It was a socially acknowledged romantic and sexual practice in ancient Greece and Rome and elsewhere in the world, such as pre-Meiji Japan. When doing the research on this topic, I really found it odd how they made it sound so romantic, but what it really is, it's slavery. But they found a way to make it sound as though it's a beautiful experience, very odd. It wasn't hidden, it was embedded into the culture, praised in some circles, and often ritualized. This wasn't just abuse, it was structured on power. So when you understand what the word truly means and what this social culture from the past truly meant, when you read stuff like socially acknowledged romantic and sexual practices in ancient Greece and Rome, it doesn't really portray what actually happened. These victims really didn't have a choice. You became property. You became something that should be flaunted to everyone, passed around to your friends and have fun with. You don't really have a choice. The deterioration of a person's dignity and humanity was something that was considered to be entertainment. So how is it, romantic, right? I just don't find it romantic, but I really appreciate scholars who wrote these wonderful words to make the situation seem more romantic than it should be. They were slaves. People may believe that upper class men during that time needed to find a way to entertain themselves. So this activity was just for fun, but it's really a representation of status. They would always say that marriages do not take place for love, so all they had was the joy of dominating a boy or a youth to feel empowered, that there is something about their fate that they could control. I look at it as, when you look at the history of slavery in the world, especially America, the islands and places like that, the more slaves you had, the more prosperous you were, the more money you made. You were considered a very rich man because of the amount of slaves that you had. In this situation, it's not the case. It's not the amount of boys or youth that you had under your control as your sexual slave that was empowering. It was just a symbol of status. Who had the prettiest boy? So it's not as though they were making money off of it. It was just purely for entertainment. And what really stood out to me in the statement that I made is that there is something about their faith that they could control. And that's what it truly was about. It was control, domination. It empowered these people who were already in power. When looking at this history, I don't just see abuse, I see entertainment masked as enlightenment. I see men already in power demanding more control. I see a culture that didn't value love, even in marriage, but prioritized domination, emotional, sexual, and spiritual dominance. I said before that this practice was more about status, but power and status goes hand in hand. Power and status was a display of ownership, of youth, of time, of legacy. And then there's the control of fate, where men had status, but controlling someone else's development gave them godlike grip over destiny. And there's so many people that are running around trying to steal other people's destinies. I'm not surprised that this was a big deal back in the day. And then, of course, youth as property. Everyone was obsessed with property back in the day. And you can kind of see that nowadays as well, especially in relationships where, a woman or a man would consider each other their property. So youth as property. Boys were not protected. They were consumed and often discarded. Of course, once you reached a certain age, you are no longer considered to be youthful and beautiful, and your innocence has now been stolen and gone. So you're no longer entertaining. They discard you. That's your only way out, is to be discarded after they have completely ripped apart your dignity and stolen your boyhood and then your manhood. Then what are you left with? Your only option is to go and die or become a prostitute. Those are your only two options. And I mean, it's not like while you were a slave to a powerful man that you had the opportunity to learn something, learn a new craft, and be able to implement that after, you've been discarded. That's not really an option that was available to them. Your purpose was to just be entertainment. You did not have time to read or write or become more educated for when they're done with you. That's not how slavery ever worked. If you want to be a good slave, you need to be uneducated. You need to be in a position where nothing and no one can help you. There is no connection. You're completely isolated. And you just have to wait until you're old enough and not attractive enough for them to be released. But again, once you're in the world, what options do you have? It's either prostitution or death. You really have no other options. And again, when you're doing the research, it doesn't really tell you what happened to those boys when they grew up into men. You don't hear about it. They don't have opportunities. Nothing was given to them. So what really was left? Once they got discarded, it was just over. No one cared about them anymore. And that would really strip away, your life. It's not just dignity now. It's not just your humanity that you lost. You just lost value. And as humanity, as human beings, we want to be valued. What is your purpose after that? Now let's go a little deeper. We need to sit on the innocence of it all. Why do predators seek out the innocence? Why were young boys full of curiosity, wonder, and trust often the targets? It is most likely because the predator lost their own innocence too early, so they seek to destroy in others what they no longer possess. And when I say lost their innocence, I don't mean in a sense of being a slave themselves. I mean, they lost their innocence in so many other ways because, again, we don't know what these men in power, what their childhoods were like. But I don't believe they were put in a situation where they were slaves themselves. Once you become a slave and you are discarded, there really wasn't any opportunity for you to become an upper class or someone in power after going through that as a boy. So that's not what I meant by they lose their innocence. They lost something, maybe their childhood, and they may see a boy who's happy and running around even though they're poor and they don't have, a penny to their name. They're hungry, they're starving, but is still playing and is still happy. They could see that and just be jealous. Now, is it envy? Is it a warped sense of reclaiming power by taking it from someone smaller, someone softer, someone still untouched by the world's darkness? Or is it the illusion that innocence is something they can consume, believing that by possessing it in someone else, they can escape the haunting truth of what they've become? There are a lot of delusional people out there. A lot of people lie to themselves and then turn around and lie to everyone else. And they do it flawlessly because they truly believe the lie that they tell themselves. And you wouldn't expect that from people in power, but I find the more that people have power, the more crazed and borderline insane they become. Either way, it's betrayal. It's called spiritual theft. So I guess not having any familial connection with these boys that you picked up from who knows where makes it easier for you to do it. For some, and for others who really show no sympathy, they might even take their own son. You wouldn't know. Because again, the delusion, the lie that they tell themselves, and then the lie that they tell others, they're the same. They truly believe it. When society refused to protect those boys, or worse, shame them into silence, we don't just lose innocence, we lose future men who could have grown into light still inside of them. Pederasty was never about mentorship or education. It was a ritualized robbery. A system that normalized the taking of something that can never be returned. This is the part I wrestle with the most. Those weren't desperate men. They were powerful, wealthy, praised. They weren't lacking food, shelter, or opportunity. They had students, soldiers, servants, even slaves. They wanted for nothing. So why did they still take? Why did they need to consume something as sacred and untamed as a boy's innocence? What did these predators lose that would be comparable to innocence in that way? And I just couldn't think about it. All I saw was that it was just a cycle of pain. But what if it wasn't just that? What if it was envy, not of status, but of spirit? I talked about this in the Spirit of Jealousy podcast episode, where I wondered, why were people jealous? And it's always the people that have more that seems to be jealous of the people that don't have a lot. So what is it? They always look at the other side as greener for some apparent reason, as if they have way more, even though they don't. They may even have less or the same amount, but they're still jealous. They're still jealous. And now, after kind of going through this podcast episode, I mean, technically the title did tell me spirit, spirit of jealousy, spirit. That's what they're jealous of. It's your spirit. Children have an abundance of spirit. They have the spirit of abundance. And that is what these people crave. Maybe that they felt that they lost that. But anywho, it wasn't about love. It wasn't even about desire. It was about domination. They use children to feel alive, and that's the darkest part. When a person who has everything still craves control over someone small and powerless, what we're witnessing isn't passion, it's decay. That's why I believe pederasty was entertainment to them, because pain, confusion, and obedience make them feel important. Their status wasn't enough. They needed to manipulate innocence to remind themselves that they are God in a culture that already worshiped them. But what kind of God needs to harm a child to feel divine? In today's society, we think pederasty is a relic of the past, but it has never really disappeared. It has become quieter, more hidden, masked as mentorship, affection, or even protection. I had a very interesting conversation with a gay man who opened up to me about his experience some time ago. He told me, with all the love in his voice, that the older man who first approached him changed his life. He said that this man taught him things and looked out for him. So I was very curious, what do you mean by taught you things, Because again, he's 16 years old. And this man is late 30s, early 40s. And so I said, rewind. How did you guys meet? He said, well, this man approached me, even came over to his house, while his mom was there, and, they all got along, and they had a conversation where he offered to, teach him the ways of their culture, the LGBT community. And so I said, okay, is there a playbook? I don't understand. I thought LGBT people were like people. Is there a whole playbook? And he said, well, no, but during that time, they did a lot of sexual things. And so he taught him all about these sexual things and how to take care of himself after these sexual things happen. And I was like, okay. But he spoke of this man with admiration. What shocked me the most about what this man was telling me, I was shocked throughout the entire conversation. And I could not, my brain just short-circuited throughout all of this, because I'm like, what am I hearing right now? Just completely going crazy. The part that shocked me the most was that his mother supported this. She supported this so-called relationship, which had me questioning, did both of them lack awareness? Because he's 16. So he's still a child. You're still his mother. So to be involved in this, it would mean that both of you lacked awareness together and thought this was okay. You must not have truly told your mom everything that was happening between you and this old man. So I remembered asking him, do you ever feel that he had taken advantage of you? And he said, no, it was for my betterment. He could not name what had happened to him. He couldn't name it as abuse. He had to say that it was the best thing that ever happened to him ever in his lifetime. And when he thinks about this man, he just glows and he lights up, and it was the most amazing moment of his life, and that he wished he could find that again, like the longing in the way that he was talking about it, all because it was wrapped up in care, praise, and attention. In his mind, that man had saved him from something else. But saved him from what? What was the demon that you were running from? You came out as gay, and you're now trying to navigate life But what I got from the story was that he took full advantage of your innocence and took as much as he can, to the point that now we're at a bar and you're telling me all of this, and I have a beer in front of me that I haven't touched because the story has shocked me into just not being able to function, and you having to run to the bathroom every few minutes because apparently your asshole is so stretched out you can't hold shit. You can't hold shit. And this is what you went through from the age of 16 due to this man. And now, if you feel it, you have to be on a toilet. And if you're not near a toilet, you're going to shit yourself. And I'm just looking at him completely confused because I was like, I don't think your cheeks can save it from rolling down your leg, So I was just shocked. To me, it is a sickness. When manipulation is served with love, the victim believes the harm was a gift. When trauma is dressed up as a rite of passage, we stop calling it what it is. In some circles, especially in the gay community, this has been passed as something normal or a cultural pattern. But I have, met other gay men who, when I shared the story with them, were appalled and disgusted and was like, this is what's wrong with the community. This is like the dark side of it. And they said that, they came out when they were young as well, but they've never put themselves in that situation because they had some self-respect. So then I thought, okay, I am not going crazy. This is not normal. And in most of the gay community, it's not normal. But even when I was having this conversation with this boy, young man, because he was like 20 something years old at this point, and he was telling me the story, even though my brain could not function because I'm in complete shock, because to me, what he's describing is abuse. It's abuse. And I had to ask in the end, I said, why did you guys part ways? And he said to me, it was just time. We were doing this for a few years and he felt that I've learned enough. And so, we remain friends. And I said, when you say friends, I mean, you guys are still talking, right? He's like, yeah, like once in a while. Like, you mean like once a year, once a month? What do you mean? And he's like, once in a while, like if I message him, he'll message me back. But I'm like, based on what you're saying, he sounds like he's kind of trying to push you away, but he doesn't want to make it seem like what it is, which is that once he was done with you, he got all he wanted from you, ruined your asshole. He now discarded you, but he's trying to play the nice guy role while, messaging you back in a very dry form. He's not continuing a conversation. He's not trying to leave a door open for you to come back and think that this is okay because you've passed the age limit. That's what I'm getting from what this guy is sharing with me. And so he believes they're still friends. And he's running around picking partners, hoping to find him again. But he's ending up with people who kind of want to be educated or at least have the full experience. And because he's well used up, he can now pass on what he has learned to somebody else while in a relationship with them. And he just kind of runs through guys every few months or maybe a year. So he started to repeat the same patterns that he had learned from his abuser, which is once, you use them up, you let them go and you find somebody fresher. You understand what I'm saying? He did not see a problem in his actions or behaviors because that's all he knew. And then even though to me, it's like you're old enough to know that what had happened to you isn't normal and it also isn't right. So why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to yourself? And so, he couldn't really give me an answer because he was trying to make it seem like he's living a really fun lifestyle. I said, dog, I see you running for the bus with your legs crossed together, trying to keep your poo-poo in. This is not right. You know what I mean? This is a struggle life. You're living a struggle life. I understand you picked this struggle, but nobody wants to be out in public and realize they need to go to the bathroom and shat themselves, and you need to take the bus to go home. What are you planning on doing? Did you bring an extra pair of pants, extra pair of underwear? Like how like what? You know what I mean? So I am, again, still shocked. My mind is running a mile a minute listening to all of this. Confused as to why he's trying to praise what he's doing and what he's going through. All I saw was just a sadness, someone who could not find love and is seeking something that he associates as being love through other people, and constantly hitting a roadblock where he's unsatisfied. And then when speaking to this other gay guy who, really loves himself, represents himself well, you won't catch him participating in any nonsense because he's not that type of guy. He has some self-respect. I start looking back and I think when I met him and we would talk, I never thought that he lacked self-respect. I never thought that, because he was so charismatic. He was very outgoing. He's always the life of the party, just so happy. You would never think that it's masking something deeper, because again, he's lying to himself and then he lies to other people. End of that story. Let's proceed. This podcast episode is not allowed to get any longer. So these boys grow into men still trying to process why someone discarded them after giving them everything. They mistake trauma bond for romance. They associate exploitation with belonging. And society rarely questions it because we're still too afraid to speak honestly about male victimhood, and even more afraid to confront it within marginalized community. Mind you, the story I told you is a guy, I think he's El Salvadorian. I think he's from El Salvador. Yeah, he's from El Salvador. And we had bonded because I have friends who are from El Salvador and I love them to death. So I automatically associate every El Salvadorian person as like amazing, because that was the experience that I had. So we would chop it up and we talk, and I still love him. I still love him to this day. Like, that opinion has not changed based on what he has been through. I will not judge him for that. He was just miseducated. Whether it was in ancient Greece or someone's bedroom, today, when power seeks out the vulnerable and then label it mentorship or love, what we're witnessing is not affection. It's abuse wrapped in praise, and we need to stop calling it anything less. This episode does have a little bit of history, but it's not about history. It's about what we're still carrying. It's about who still doesn't feel safe. It's about trauma that never had a voice. And as a woman, I may not have lived this pain, but I'm definitely not going to remain silent about it. And I hope that other people don't remain silent about it as well. We like to think we've come far, but have we? Today, male sexual trauma is still overlooked, ignored, mocked, or minimized. We change the language, but not always the mindset. This is a disturbing normalization and psychological confusion where abuse is disguised. These predators are successfully moving confidently within circles and communities who protect them. Their family members, through coercion and projecting fear of shame onto them as if they did something wrong, but it was really the predator. So why would we remain silent and normalize all this? This is a sickness. It's a sickness. This is an old system of power that exists today. I started to look into, the Canadian trafficking stats, which there seems to be different numbers all over the place. And it's really hard to identify, because again, you have people who are exhibiting these behaviors and participating in this as willing participants. And then there are those who are forced into it through trafficking, right? So one of the websites that I was researching on said between 2010 and 2020, police service in Canada has reported 2,977 incidents of human trafficking. Those figures don't consider the unknown number of victims that are not reported. That includes women and children includes boys. When I go on Stats Canada, Statistical Canada, and look up stats that on dates that are closer to where we are now, it says in 2023, the largest majority of human trafficking, especially police reported human trafficking, is 85% of human trafficking incidents that were actually reported. And so it then continued by talking about 2013 to 2023, where more than 8 to 10 incidents of human trafficking, 86% really, were reported to the police. It also broke down certain cities around my area from 2013 to 2023. It said about 45% of all police reported incidents of human trafficking in Canada, such as Toronto, is 20%. Ottawa is 9%, Halifax 6%, Montreal 6%, and London, Ontario 4%. So another thing that I noticed with Stats Canada as I'm going through everything, because again, the earliest date I could find is 2023, is that the vast amount of human trafficking that we have here in Canada is 93% were women and girls. But when it comes to children and youth, again, they're slapping the boys and the girls together, they're just children, is 23% of these youth are under 18 years of age. And a small number of victims, 7%, were men and boys. And I love how they kind of threw that in there. And I think this is a problem that I'm having with Statistics Canada. It's like, are you trying to downplay the severity of the situation by saying, see, just a small number of victims for men and boys, just a little 7%, And I get it, they're trying to make us feel a little bit better by saying, just a small number of victims are men and boys. But for 93%, and let's be real, I haven't read through everything as of yet. I haven't really seen any stats on human trafficking for people up north, Nunavut, Yellowknife, places like that, where a lot of First Nation girls and children and women are disappearing, right? And I really wanted to find a little bit more about that. But again, nobody really wants to look into it. But there was something that I read. So this is the part where, I found something on another site where it talked about 93% of identified sex trafficking victims are Canadian citizens, not foreign citizens. So it sounds like these traffickers are very picky. There's just stats everywhere you look. So with this one, it says 96% of trafficking victims in Canada are female. 71% of trafficking victims in Canada are under the age of 25. 91% of human trafficking victims in Canada know their traffickers, which we all know this. 9% are strangers. 31% are friends and acquaintance. 21% criminal, business, or other relationships, and 31% are spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, and intimate partners. Human trafficking is a whole corporation. There are so many people involved, and again, they are protected. And that is the issue that we are having nowadays, is that justice cannot come for these victims. Children cannot be protected because these people in power, and that's what they are, they're in power, are doing this. Trafficking is a lucrative business. I think it's bigger than the makeup industry. Of course, you can always use the makeup industry to traffic people, you know what I mean? But it is the most lucrative business in the world, and has always been lucrative, going all the way back to the beginning of time, when this was even introduced to people. and they created a business out of it. A lot of people made their fortunes on the backs of other people, using other people, selling their slaves, acquiring a lot of slaves. There's selling slaves for sex. Then there's breeding slaves. They made a shit ton of money off of this. And so we still have this problem today. Now, I don't want to make this podcast episode too long, but I would like to touch on the US stats because I'm quite curious if it's more than Canada. I doubt it. I feel like they both kind of share similar numbers, but they might be slightly higher. But it would be funny to do the research and realize that they are actually slightly lower. So I kind of want to do that, but I don't want to make this podcast episode too long. So I'm going to end it here. The system still thrives. Thank you for supporting the Orchid Blooms podcast. Take this time to subscribe, follow. Don't forget to rate and leave a review on my podcast platform or any podcast platform of your choice. Subscribe and follow our social media pages, Orchid Bloom's YouTube channel, The Ambitious Obsession Network on Facebook, at The Ambitious Ops on Twitter, at The Ambitious Net on Instagram. Don't forget to share your favorite podcast episode with your family and your friends, and I hope you have a splendid day.